All right, guys, it is Wednesday, September 16th. Today's the first episode, the first official episode of Business Talk After Hours, right, guys? So I am Mitch Beinhacker. I'm a business attorney in Clark, New Jersey. I'm also the host of the Accidental Entrepreneur podcast. The reason that's important is because our first guest was the first guest on my podcast. So we'll bring Jack in the room in a minute. But why don't we go around the circle? Trevor, Jeff, Mike, and you guys introduce yourselves. And then we'll bring Jack on to talk about networking today.
Sure. I'm Jeff Brenner. I'm a managing director at MidCap Advisors. We are a lower middle market private investment banking firm that focuses on companies from 5 million to 100 million. We mainly focus on the sell side of the practice.
Okay, Trevor?
Yeah, I'm Trevor Anderson. I own TRJ Consulting Services. We are a small boutique consulting firm focusing on fractional CFO and COO work for small businesses and startups, and especially in the lower Series A and early seed rounds.
And Mike?
Good morning, everyone. Michael Manella, wealth advisor with Merrill Lynch. Run a family office type of wealth management practice, with clients varying from small business owners to C-suite executives and kind of everything in between.
Okay, and on today's show, we have the pleasure of bringing on our first guest, gentleman that I've known for probably 15 or some odd years, Jack Killion. Jack was the former owner of a company called the Eagle Rock Group, which was kind of a fund-to-funds investment company. He's written a book called Network All the Time, which we'll talk about. I think he was working on a second book. I don't know if it came out yet. And he just recently launched Street Smart Entrepreneurs, which is basically a forum or a community for teaching entrepreneurs and training them and interacting with them. But I'll let him talk about that. So I'm going to bring him on the show right now. And Jack, let's see. Jack, good to have you on. I appreciate you coming on our first episode of Business Talk After Hours. I was just telling the guys all about you, that you were my first guest. You were how I launched my podcast into stardom.
There we go.
We talked about your whole story. So I told the guys about your book, Network All the Time, and Street Smart Entrepreneurs. I mentioned it, but maybe we can talk about all the stuff you're doing in the networking, because that's really the focus of today. Networking for entrepreneurs and businesses and why it's important. And the guys, I'm sure, will throw questions at you as well.
Good. Glad to meet everybody. Thanks for having me.
Nice to meet you, Jack.
Pleasure to meet you, Jack.
Glad you're here.
I've been, when I was younger, up until about 30, I was clueless about the importance of networking and didn't know how to do it. And that was about the time I started on my entrepreneurial career, which so far has involved starting 9 companies and buying and developing another one. And as I went down that path of being an entrepreneur, I had no resources, no money, no staff, no offices, no nothing. So I really had to start meeting people and building relationships as a way to grow every business I've ever started. So just by out of necessity, I've taught myself to be pretty skilled at it. And I even wrote a book called Network All the Time, Everywhere with Everybody, because that's my philosophy. And the book has gotten a 5-star review on Amazon.
Very nice.
And I really use the book as a relatively expensive business card. So I like to give out copies. I'm sending out 3 today. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I've actually coached maybe 1,000 people on how to develop these skills. I've done it with online programs, and I've also done it in person at companies like Deloitte, Colgate-Palmolive, JP Morgan, Signature Bank, RPI, Rutgers. So, it's a passion of mine. And I think it's a resource that most people don't really appreciate enough and don't put enough effort into developing.
Jack, I think that's what amazes me when you interview or coach these people, because you're not coaching kids who are coming out of college and learning how to build their networks. These are executives. These are people that are seasoned. So what's been your experience? I mean, do they just don't understand? Like where are they lacking in skills in that market or in that area? Actually,
I think they underestimate the importance of it. Many of them trivialize it and think it really means going to events and exchanging business cards.
Right.
And they worry about keeping score, too many of them. They worry about what can I get out of meeting this guy or this woman.
Right.
And I think the focus has got to be totally the reverse of that.
Yeah,
It's
it's
got
all
to be,
giver's gain.
Absolutely.
it's
Yep.
got to be finding ways to add value to other people.
Right.
So maybe the most important question you can ask anybody is, what can I do to help?
Right.
And I think that's a great way to begin to build a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So I get it. So people, they all go in, they want to sell whatever it is they sell, and they're not focusing on the other people, and they should be.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I popped your book up on the screen while we were talking, so it is available on Amazon, and I hope you're
Great.
going to get us all autographed copies. So
You betcha.
can read the
Anybody
book.
sends me their email address or with their address, I'll be happy to send you a copy.
Terrific.
Okay. That goes for people on the show, not anybody listening. Anybody listening can go buy it on Amazon.
No, I think I would do that with anybody who's interested enough to ask.
Okay, there you go. Jack put it out there. Free book.
Yeah, I'm trying to spread the word here.
Right, of course.
Great.
So, Jack, you had told me a while ago you were working on a second book. Has that book come out yet, or is it still in
No,
process?
it's not out yet. It's probably 90% done.
Okay.
And the working title is Been There, Done That. And I take each phase of my life, going back to when I was a kid, and I try to distill the lessons I learned in that phase of my life that I think apply to any business leader, regardless of the type or size of organization they're running.
Okay.
And so, what did I learn going to undergraduate school and graduate school and my first job in England? What did I learn working at McKinsey? And what have I learned starting and running 10 different companies? Like I spent 20 years with my wife breeding and training racehorses. What lessons did I learn doing that apply to any of you guys, anybody on this call? And one of the key lessons I learned in that business is to trust my gut. Because in a lot of business situations, if you make a decision that you're queasy about and you're not sure, and you make it anyway, despite your gut feeling, you can generally reverse the consequences. You can fire the person or change clients or change a supplier. But in the horse racing business, if you make a decision that you inherently don't feel comfortable about, but you make it anyway, you can wind up killing a horse.
Yeah.
So in my 20 years of working in that industry, I've had 3 horses get killed because I made bad decisions.
Ooh.
And that is
Wow.
a heart-wrenching kind of thing to go through. In fact, I did that twice in 1 week. I made 2 bad decisions and wound up killing 2 horses at the track.
Yeah.
So
Wow. That's a
the
tough
other
business.
lesson I learned in that industry is to be patient. So I've adopted sort of the Jack's 1-year rule. I think anything significant takes a year to happen. So from
Yeah,
the
that's probably
time
true in all businesses, right?
Yeah.
People are just too
Yeah.
impatient. They think it's
Yep.
going to happen in a week, in a month.
No, so from the time I really started this new venture, Street Smart Entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
we're making progress every day, but it'll be at least a year before I really feel like I've got some momentum going, and we've got to really head to steam and accomplishing some good things with good people. So you got to be patient,
Right.
no matter what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't stand behind the horse, I think. My daughter rides, so that's
I've
probably a
only
bad
been
idea.
kicked once
Oh,
by a
that's
horse
good.
in 20 years.
I don't know. Did you see the Derby that last weekend? One of the
Sure.
horses had to scratch because he freaked out and fell on top of the jockey. I think broke the jockey's leg or arm or
Yeah,
something.
Oh, wow.
fell on top of the handler in the saddling enclosure.
The funny thing was, wasn't it the trainer trained 2 horses? One had to scratch and the other one won, didn't it?
Right. Bob Baffert.
It's a high stakes
Oh,
business.
right.
High stakes business.
Yep.
But we'll get into Street Smart a little bit sooner. But and guys, if you have questions, let's jump in. But I think, Jack, over the years, you probably were the first guy to really teach me about networking and how to do it properly and how to be a giver, always on the long end of the giving stick.
Yep.
And I find that nowadays So I didn't even know what Zoom was until you told me about it. And I was like, what do we need this for? And you're like, well,
Right.
I'm training people all over the country. Now we can't live without it, right? Because we're all stuck in our
Right.
houses. But I think that if you know, one of the lessons of going to, or that's my question, like, what are the things that you tell people when they're attending all these online meetings? And some of them look terrible. They vomit all over the people when they're talking.
So what's your question?
My question is, what kind of advice do you give to people who are attending these virtual meetings where you can't really shake someone's hand or give them your business card? How do you stand out and connect and so forth?
Well, if I was coaching, and I've done networking coaching on Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
and I can either do it for a company, and I like to do it with like 10 or 12 people in the group, so we make it interactive.
Mm-hmm.
So I've done it with organizations, but I've also pulled together like 10 random people from different parts of the country. And it's just a very good way for them to begin to know each other in a real dialogue. And you know, some of the things I go through is you know, I'm not. A couple of years ago, I was coaching at Verizon, and I was coaching a women's group, and they asked me, you know, how do you spend your time networking? How do you really allocate that? So I went up to a blackboard and I drew out a little grid, and I put down all the possible ways I could network.
This was in
Breakfast
person,
meetings,
right?
lunch
You were
meetings.
there in person?
Yeah, I was there in person.
Okay.
Lunch meeting, but I do this now on Zoom coaching sessions. And I have a slide that shows, you know, breakfast meetings, lunch meetings, dinner meetings, going to events in membership groups and coffee meetings or drinks after work.
Right.
And by far the dominant way I network back then, this is before pre-COVID,
Right.
was breakfast meetings.
Yep.
And the two most time consuming ways I spent my time networking were breakfast meetings and then transportation to and from meetings, which meant mostly to breakfast. So between having breakfast and the time I spent getting to places, all
Right.
the places, that was like 80% of the time I spent networking. Now I've eliminated breakfast meetings. I haven't had a breakfast meeting since March.
Right.
And now I've replaced that with Zoom meetings.
Yeah. And you could do 2 or 3 of them back to back and
And,
not
you know,
travel.
even before COVID-19, I very seldom went to networking events and I very seldom joined networking groups. And I much prefer organizing my own networking events. And I've done that in every business that I've been in, and organizing my own networking groups. And I've done that in several different situations. And that gives me total control over who's coming, what
Right.
the agenda is, where it is. So, for example, I put together a networking group for graduates of the MIT Business School, which is where I went to grad school. And it's great. I get to decide when we're going to have the meetings, how often we're going to have the meetings. I don't have any bylaws. I don't have any other officers. I do it whenever I want. And it really, really works.
Now that was a model for the Sloan School, right? You had tried it
Yeah.
out and you're helping them do other things around the country, or did that kind of slow down because of coronavirus?
No, they're beginning to replicate it around the world. And then in every business I've been in, I've organized events because I would much rather have clients coming to me than me chasing clients. So when I had a manufacturing company, I put together an alliance with the U.S. Department of Commerce, and they helped me organize seminars at American embassies in Latin America, where I got the embassies to host these events and also to help promote them within their countries. This is when I was in the polymer industry. So the embassy would help me market the polymer companies in Mexico or Venezuela or Panama. And we wound up selling millions of dollars worth of equipment through those events that cost me almost nothing to organize. So I'm big on doing my own things versus going to other people events.
Right. Right. So you do more one-on-one. So then, but the networking really happens outside the meeting when the people connect individually, right?
Yeah. But again, my philosophy is to get people coming to me.
Right.
And once I've got them in a room, in a conference room or in my factory, then we can, manage and begin to develop those relationships.
Jack, I have
Yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, so I actually have a question. So, I think it's real important when networking to kind of cross-pollinate, right? Having attorneys, people in finance, wealth management, investment bankers. How important do you think that is, as you get larger and scale up? Because for me, like when I'll go to a group, I'll meet a bunch of great people, but then you'll have that one person who has such an interesting point of view, but a completely different field, whether it be marketing, like I said before, legal. And I think that's impressive. That's when I think you have that fire that just ignites. And then you touch base afterwards and it's like, wow, I had no idea that you even thought like that. Let's figure out how we can do something together.
I think one of the keys to all this networking stuff is to have a real passion and a sense of curiosity. So I have a philosophy that I'll talk to anybody once. So I take all kinds of calls from people. First of all, I think it's polite, but I've got 5 minutes to invest in a new person, and in 5 minutes I get a pretty quick read whether this is somebody that maybe we have some synergies together. So I think you have to have a sense of curiosity. I think that's something also that stops other people from being good at this. They don't really have a strong interest in other people. They don't have a real sense of curiosity.
Right.
And as a result, they're not good at spotting opportunities.
Right.
And I think you can spot opportunities driving down the highway and see a
all over the
billboard,
place. Yeah.
or read a magazine article, or hear something on the radio. So I'm organizing an event next Friday called the Global Entrepreneurs Forum, and I'm bringing in a guest speaker. I was watching Shark Tank one night, and I saw this young entrepreneur, Muslim American entrepreneur, and he really struck me as an interesting guy. I thought he'd be a great guest on this Global Entrepreneurs Forum I'm organizing. So I reached out to him and managed to make contact, and he's going to be the guest next Friday on our program.
Oh, very nice.
And it
Oh,
was
wow.
because, I'm watching television, this guy's interesting, and I'm thinking, how do I capitalize on the fact that he's interesting?
Right.
And I'd like to meet him and, see what kind of synergies we have. Maybe he can hook me into Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban became an investor in this company. So you have to have your mind engaged all the time, not about taking advantage of people, but about, how do we really create something good together? I'm sure this guy, Sammy, who's going to be our guest speaker, he's going to get a lot of benefits out of appearing on our program. He's going to attract a lot of attention. I've already started trying to help him penetrate new food chains that I have
Yeah, that's
connections with.
Snacklands, right? Is that the company?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get him on my podcast when I saw
Jack,
you.
I have a question. So, I'll attend networking events, or as you said, pull together a networking group. And after you have the initial engagement with the person and you try to follow up, a lot of times I find that people aren't as engaged and aren't willing to keep, the networking going. What ideas and thoughts do you have about how to keep someone that you feel could be a good partner, to keep them engaged in the networking process?
I've got a couple of observations. One of which is, if the person really is stuck in me, I consider that a litmus test, and he or she is really telling me that we don't really have much in common, and I shouldn't spend too much time worried about them.
Okay.
So, I don't want to, I'm pretty jammed up all the time. I don't want to really be spending time with people who aren't really interested in what we might do together. So that's the first part.
Right.
But the second part is you constantly should be finding ways to add value to the other person. Like I finally had my first lunch meeting yesterday since March, and I had it with a former student of mine at FDU, a business school student, when I was an adjunct professor. I haven't seen him in 15 years.
Wow.
He's now the chief operating officer of rheology, and but we've stayed in touch. So I would read a book that I thought he might be interested in, and I'd send him a message. You ought to read this book. And when he would announce his promotions on LinkedIn, I'd always send him a little note. So, I found ways to stay in touch in a non-aggressive,
Right.
polite way, but constantly and not chasing him down, not trying to sell him anything,
Right.
but, just trying to, if I ran across something I thought he'd be interested in, like I put him in touch with a guy this morning that I had a breakfast Zoom call with this morning. I think there's synergies there.
So casual touch points.
Casual touch points, but adding value.
Yeah.
Adding value.
Okay.
Not just saying, give me a call next Friday.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And it's always, I think I get a lot of emails from people who don't put either my name or their name in the emails. I think that's kind of impolite. So I always put the person's name in that I'm sending it to. And I always put my name at the end of it. That sounds like little BS things, but I'm sensitive when people don't do that to me.
Well, then it looks like an automated message, like they just
Right.
Yeah.
clicked on a
Right.
template. and sent it.
Impersonal.
Right. You got to
Yeah.
personalize things.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, I think like some of it comes down, and I don't know how Mike feels, but some of it comes down to like sticking with what you promise. Like if you meet with somebody at breakfast, oh, you know what? I'd love to introduce you to my friend Jack for this reason, this. Make sure you do it.
Right.
Follow through.
Make the connections, the
Yeah.
introduction, even if it's via email. It's not so difficult nowadays,
Well,
Yeah.
that raises the trust level.
Right.
Yeah.
I've got Jack's little 24-hour rule. I think you got to get back to people within 24 hours.
Yeah.
So if you go to a conference or a trade show and you pick up a bunch of business cards and you sort them out, and the ones that are priorities, I think you need to get back to them in 24 hours.
Yeah. I think
Otherwise-
before the electronic age, maybe 72 hours, but now it's
Right.
very easy to reach out and touch somebody
Right.
very
If
quickly.
it goes much longer, if it goes 72 hours or 96 hours, people are going to forget about the whole discussion.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
They move on.
A unique conversation you may have had is gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Exactly. So I think too, Jack, that you add a tremendous amount of value on something that it could be immensely powerful. And I think you touched on it a little earlier, talking about patience, right? Because I think that is incredibly important, especially with networking, is going into it with that giver's gain mentality, trying to help other people as
Yep.
opposed to going in and say, what am I going to get out of this? Because I think a lot of people that do that, they get disappointed and then they stop, right? Because ultimately they have just the wrong way of looking at it, if you will. And I think the patience is that you want to surround yourself with like-minded people. And to me, just to get a little background on, kind of how I look at networking is that I provide a service to my clients, but my clients have a lot of needs beyond what I do. And therefore, I want to be a resource to them. So my network cannot be big enough because I want to surround myself with people that I know I can trust and I can introduce and put them in the right hands. And that's why, too, is that I'm always curious. And I'll tell the people right up front when networking is that maybe there's not an immediate introduction I can make right this second, but I know that this will probably come up sometime in the future. And I think to the point you talked about touch points, I think it's just so important is just having some kind of ongoing, touch point kind of along the way, and kind of keeping them front and center, because I think ultimately what you're really doing is you're developing relationships with your client as well as you're developing a relationship with the professional, and you're getting to know one another, and as well as you're providing resources. I mean, is really the bottom line. And I think, with that mindset, you hit the nail on the head. You focus on helping people, if you will. Everything else will kind of follow from that. So I think you had a tremendous amount of value, and I think that networking can be very, very powerful.
what kind of business are you in, Michael?
So I'm in wealth management. So, it really kind of ranges in regards to, I mean, when I look at it, when I take a step back, I really help clients through minor and major financial transitions in their life around retirement, whether that's growing a business, whether that's selling a business, passing wealth to the next generation. So it really involves many different industries, many different types of clients. So therefore there's a lot of things that come up, right? That basically where, I need to tap into other resources of things that I don't do personally, as well. Just like, for instance, on this call right now. So, where Mitchell could come in and help with the overall estate plan, right? And preparing the financial documents for that. Or Jeff can help with, if someone's getting ready to either acquire a business to grow or thinking about selling their business, right? Where Jeff can come in, or someone needs help with financials, so I can lean on Trevor. Where basically you can kind of come in and bridge the gap with his experience from, as an example, how his experience in private equity and bringing operating to finance and bridging the gap in between and finding that need. Like, listen, you have a great business here, but you need to kind of put it all together. So just on this call alone, that's just kind of to highlight, Superhuman Network. And that's kind of how I, how I go about it, because I'm problem solving, I'm providing solutions to the client.
Yep. I spent 18 years running a fund of funds.
Okay.
So I've been in the investment business before. When I coach young people, I've been in the high schools talking about this stuff. I've been in the colleges, and young people, and this applies to older people too, but young people think that they can't really add value. Like I ask maybe high school kids, if you were meeting with Bill Gates today, how would you add value? Because they tell me, I'm 15 or 16 or 17 years old. What possibly can I do for somebody, more senior? I said, come on. I said, do you have a favorite Italian restaurant?
Right.
Have you seen a good movie?
Yeah.
Have you read a good
Life
book?
experiences.
Yeah. Have you played a good golf course? Have you been to a good B&B?
Yep.
Adding value to people does not have to be just giving them connections.
Yep.
Right.
There's ways to add value personally, but when you get to know the person, there's ways to add value professionally as you get to know them. And,
Yep.
and I tell people I equate networking to rock climbing, and you're trying to find finger holds.
Yep.
So,
Oh,
one time I was in Tortolo, we took our son down there to go scuba diving, and we're walking on the beach, me and my son at night, and this guy comes walking down the beach with a dog. Well, we're dog people. We've always had dogs. We start talking about dogs.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it turns out this guy was an international lawyer in the hedge fund space. And we wound up meeting at his office the next day. And then he put me in touch with a hedge fund that I eventually invested in. So, you got to look at relationships in a broad way. Maybe you have a way, maybe I have a way of helping one of your kids. Maybe your kid is trying to get into MIT. Maybe I could help, or maybe your kid is trying to get an internship.
Exactly.
Or find a baseball tutor.
Yep.
So it's getting to know the person in total.
Yeah.
And that's when you can really begin to build trust. And it's not just superficially exchanging contacts.
Exactly. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier about, and it's just music to my ears. You say, well, I'll invest 5 minutes in having a conversation with anybody. And I think there's no wasted conversation at the end of the day.
Never.
You never know where a conversation will go at the end of the day. And it's like, people get hung up. Well, why am I going to waste my time? Well, at the end of the day, if you don't do it, nothing will ever happen. I mean,
No.
at the end of the day. So it's a matter of having that conversation. You never know where, that conversation will go.
Jeff, what were we saying?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. So 4 years ago, I was out at the Rose Bowl, USC playing Penn State, and I was
You
standing.
can watch football in person? You used to be able to do that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I was standing in
The
front
old
of the porta stand and turned around and saw somebody wearing a USC shirt, and we started talking, and he was in liquor business, asked me what I did. I told him, I was an investment banker. He said, oh, I have a company that I'm, looking to raise capital with. What's your email address? So I gave him the email address. I never figured that I would hear from him again. P.S. 2 weeks later, he contacted me, and he ended up hiring me to raise capital for his startup company. And
Yeah.
so it's a matter of just being opportunistic.
There's a reason
Yeah.
Jack's book is called Network All the Time.
Exactly. Yep.
Right.
No, that's unbelievable. I mean, the random things that can happen that are really important, you have to have the mindset that you sort of expect that to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think following those circles too, Jack. I mean, surrounding yourself with people like this on the call. Like Mike and I spend a fair amount of time together, both professionally and personally. And there's been so many things that have come out. We were riding our bikes at 4:45 this morning, and I believe we had a pretty good idea on something new. And it just comes out of nowhere. But it's also like a fostering mechanism. And Jack,
Right.
I see you as like a mentor to myself, people on this call, and people are listening to this. Like, I've had tremendous amount of value and mentors I met in my life in all walks of life.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to necessarily be in something I do. It's just something that they do well or they're passionate about. And then you really start to find some synergies and things you didn't really understand before, and then kind of move forward with them. And that's really big for me. It's just me personally. And I'll definitely be reaching out to you later, Jack, just so you're aware.
No, that's great.
Jack, I think one of the things you said before was really telling, is that, some people tell me, oh, I mean, networking, it's like I'm on all the time. It's exhausting. But you mentioned before, you just got to be curious about people. Like Jeff wasn't networking. He wasn't like, I'm going to meet somebody for business out at the Rose Bowl. He was curious about the guy's shirt and why this and that. He started a conversation, and there you go.
Right.
That's not exhausting, being curious.
And it could be the littlest thing. Few years ago, I went to an event at the White House that President Obama put on, and you have to go through security. So I got to the security gate early. So I had to wait out on the sidewalk. It was like in February. It is cold.
Right.
So, but I was out there like 20 minutes before security gate opened. And this other guy is standing on the corner, well-dressed, older guy, drinking a Starbucks cup of coffee. So I said to him, do you like Starbucks? And he said, yeah. He said, do you? I said, no, I don't like Starbucks. So we started talking about Starbucks coffee. I said, why are you here? He said, well, I'm representing my company at this meeting that President Obama is having. I said, what's your company? He said, the Ritz-Carlton. And I thought he was like a PR guy or investor relations guy.
Right.
I said, what's your role at the Ritz-Carlton? He said, I started the company.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I said, give me 5. So we start talking. And my wife has a foundation called the Garden State Women Education Foundation. So I start talking to him about Judy's foundation. And the Ritz-Carlton has a foundation aimed at helping the local community. So I put Judy in touch with his foundation, and they became a sponsor of some of Judy's events.
Wow.
Just from talking about Starbucks.
Right.
Wow.
So
Right.
you got to find the touch points.
Right.
It could be somebody's tie. It could be an umbrella. It could be a shirt, like Mitch said.
Yeah.
It could be a dog on the beach.
Right.
Yep.
Just
Well,
like
that-
a random comment.
Like
Yeah.
I like to network with people at the gas stations who are pumping gas. And a lot of them are from other countries. So I'm always asking them, where's your accent from? And then we get into, why are you here? What else do you do? Why did you come? So I've met really interesting people at the gas station. In fact, there's a guy at the local gas station. Now, when I stop for coffee, I bring him a cup of coffee. So
Very nice.
anybody,
Yeah.
sitting on a bus, standing on a subway,
Right.
any place.
I also
So,
find
like-
that now being so connected online, like LinkedIn, you can network with people and connect with people on LinkedIn. But you got to, like you said, you got to be curious. You got to have a touch point. People send me requests to LinkedIn all the time. I don't know who they are. They don't give me a reason why they want to talk to me. I'm
Yeah.
trying to look for something common. Maybe like Jack, if they were connected with you, I might be like, oh, I'll connect with Jeff. He knows
Right.
Jack.
Right.
But if I don't see that and they don't explain it to me, so I think you do have to have a touch point. It's almost like going up to somebody on the street and saying, hey, do you like Starbucks coffee? If you're, online, and people miss that.
I probably accept 90% of the requests to connect on LinkedIn, but I always answer it with a message that says, thanks a lot. I appreciate being connected with quality people, but where do you see the synergies between
it's a
us
good
that we might
question.
explore,
Great,
Right.
great
and
point.
how might I add value to what you're trying to accomplish?
Right. It's like a nice way of saying, why do you want to connect with me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I don't see any harm in being connected, but I want to try to get them to respond why they're reaching out.
Right.
'Cause I think a lot of it just probably comes from LinkedIn.
Definitely. And I know we're a little over time now, but can we talk a little bit about what you're doing with Street Smart Entrepreneurs and kicking that
Sure.
off?
Sure. I've been on my own for almost 50 years, starting this diversified portfolio of companies, and all of them have made it to varying extents. I haven't really tanked any of them. So I've been in real estate development, manufacturing, publishing, wealth management, coaching, venture capital. So I think I've got a lot to bring to the table in terms of empowering other entrepreneurs. And I've got a really good network of quality people who also have experience in this sector. So when I was thinking about COVID-19, I think COVID-19 is going to spur some really major improvements. It's going to help our healthcare system. It's going to spur entrepreneurship. It's going to change our education system forever. It's going to improve people's work-life balance because people aren't going to go back to wanting to spend 4 hours a day commuting.
Right.
I think it's going to make corporate America leaner and more flexible.
Yep.
This guy from Realogy yesterday told me they have 300,000 square feet of office space in New Jersey and Madison. They're going to knock that down to 100,000 square feet and never go back to the role model. So I think COVID is going to spur entrepreneurship worldwide, and I want to be part of making that happen. So the purpose of Street Smart Entrepreneurs is going to be to empower other entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs running larger companies in an entrepreneurial way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to do that by doing some strategic consulting and by developing online and in-person courses and events for the target audience that we're reaching. So we've already held 2 free webinars, and we've got this Global Entrepreneurs Forum, which is a free program next Friday. But then we're developing a portfolio of online courses that we're going to sell. The first one we hope to post later this month is one we're tentatively labeling the 8 key factors for entrepreneurial success. But then we're going to be developing courses on networking for entrepreneurs to accelerate their business, how to raise funding for startup and early stage companies,
Okay.
how to create strategic alliances that will drive business growth. So we probably have 10 or 12 courses identified that we want to put together. And in every course that we do, it's not going to be just Jack Killion rattling on. I'm going to bring in guest speakers who have particular expertise. Like I talked to a woman yesterday who has a very successful chain of 4 women's salons. And she's a non-college graduate, 45 years old with 5 kids, with 4 successful salons, and she really gets it.
Uh-huh.
So I've asked her to be a guest speaker on this 8 factors required for entrepreneurial success. I want her talking about what are her characteristics that she thinks enable her to be this successful. So in return, I've hooked her up with a woman friend of mine in New York who is a co-founder of an organization called the China U.S. Women's Foundation. And it's to bring achieving Chinese and American women together. I think she's going to find that to be a very valuable resource for her.
Right.
So you got to keep looking for ways to add value and create relationships. And
Right. It's a tool
It's
for you,
pretty
tool for
exciting
them, tool
stuff.
for the participants. Now, Jack, I guess in the show notes on our YouTube channel for this video, we can put in how to interact and like get on the mailing list for Street Smart and learn about them and how to become part of that community, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Does-
Is it streetsmartentrepreneurs.com? Is that the website or?
Yeah, with a hyphen between street and smart.
Okay. So it's street-smartentrepreneurs.com, and we'll put
Yeah,
that in
and
the
my email is jack at that.
at Street Smart. Okay. So we'll put that in the show notes for
streetsmartentrepreneurs.com.
this episode.
Yep.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on, guys. You got any last questions for Jack? I
Fine, you got
recommend
me all
his-
buzzed up here. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah,
can keep
right.
talking. I got, we got all the time, but yeah, it's all great stuff. And look, here's an opportunity, and we're always looking for new guests for you to come on or other people to come on to share their knowledge and their thoughts and their expertise for other people. And it helps you market, it helps them market. And that's really why we're doing this, to
Yeah.
create more content, to have a reason to approach somebody and say, hey, you're a marketing expert. Why don't you come on our show? That's really why we're doing this. So I appreciate you coming on today.
Exposure, a lot of exposure.
It's great meeting you, Jack. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope I
So
get
much
to,
for all the information.
yeah, I hope I get a chance to meet all of you guys and find ways to do things to add value to what you're doing.
Yeah, well,
Sounds-
Jack, we got to do in the fall like an updated podcast, because you were on my show 67 episodes ago, so we got to do like an update
Right.
as to what's going on. We
Right,
can do
no, that'd be
plans and-
great. I appreciate the opportunity to share ideas with you guys.
All right,
Yeah,
guys.
Jack, it was an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure meeting you.
Yep,
Pleasure.
thanks, all right?
All right, take care.
Yep, bye.
You guys.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Okay. All right, guys. So that ends our first official episode. See, Jack was great, and I'm sure you guys are going to come up with other people to come
Oh,
on in all
he was
walks of life.
fabulous.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
Jack's. You got to listen, and if anybody's watching this, to his story on my podcast, because when I started the podcast, I didn't really know what to do, and then I got the idea. Well, I can interview people because then it helps them, it helps me. I don't have to prepare. So I called Jack. I said, Jack, we're gonna come and you're gonna be on my podcast. I think he might have said, well, what's a podcast? But he's the one who introduced me to Zoom, ironically. So he came to my office. In those days, we had like a little studio in my old office, and we spent 2.5 hours. His whole story is fascinating. All the businesses he ended up with.
Yeah.
His dad
Yeah.
died at one point, had to take over his dad's company, was running 4 other companies, and
Wow.
just craziness. And he probably doesn't look at it as crazy because he lived it. But half the story, I'm stopping him going, you did what?
Yeah.
Well, we reached out to the Department of Commerce and we hooked up with the embassy in Mexico. I'm like, of course you did. Like, nobody would think of these things back in
Yeah.
the 60s. So you got to listen to it. Anybody's listening, pull up those 2 episodes.
He's definitely an out of the box thinker. That
Big
is.
time.
Oh, absolutely.
Big time. So any parting words from anybody before we turn off the mic and end our first episode?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I certainly hope that we could bring on other engaging and very, very interesting speakers as well, because I've certainly learned a lot and certainly look forward to additional speakers.
Right.
That,
Well, the word's out now.
yep.
It gets published. Trevor?
I think just be opportunistic. I think that's one thing I'm taking away from it. I always thought every conversation I had, I'm always looking for those little crumbs, those breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
I'm like invigorated. I'm looking forward to the next conversation I have. Mitch, you and I have something going on a little bit later.
Yep.
It's going to be great. I'm
Let's see
looking
how
forward
that goes.
to it.
I think
So,
curiosity is the word of the day, right?
yeah.
Stay curious.
Definitely. Because it helped you find, what, I mean, that's how I do the interviews. Is I'm just curious about what their story is. Right,
Yep.
Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say definitely curiosity is definitely the word of the day. And just based upon how you're talking about networking anywhere, right? And having the conversation, and really when it comes, not having an agenda, right? Basically having conversations and investing time with people. And ultimately, what comes from that is you build a group of people that you can reach
Right.
out to, rely
And
on.
not worrying about what you sell or can
Exactly.
they be a prospect for
Yeah.
you. Forget about all that stuff.
Right.
It'll all
Exactly.
happen.
Exactly.
Just
All right,
It just-
guys. So let's say goodbye for this one. And our next one is what, in 2 weeks, I think, right?
2 weeks.
We got to
Yeah, I
find a new
believe so.
guest. We got to
2 weeks,
find
yep.
a guest. So let me turn the mic off. Hold on.